Okay, good evening. Continuing in the journey through the book of Exodus. There's so much in this week's Torah portion, and so I'm not quite sure how much we'll get through, but we'll do our best. So if you remember last week's Torah portion, we had the last of the 3 plagues, 10 plagues. So we had the last 3 in last week's Torah portion, and the Jewish people were, there was the night of the death of the firstborn. Pharaoh's coming to find Moses, send the people out, get rid of these people, get rid of all these plagues, get rid of all this death, rid of all this destruction that's happening in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh is ready to let the Jewish people go. So from our perspective, we understand that really it's all orchestrated by God. This is God undoing the natural order. We talked about the 10 plagues, mirroring the 10 words, utterances with which God created the world to show that he's behind everything. As much as we get used to a natural order and the way of the world, that behind everything is God himself, creating everything, sustaining everything, involved with everything. So when we get to the end of the 10 plagues, everything's unraveled. God himself came down and I'm not sure if this is a word, smote the firstborn of Egypt. Everything, all this death, all this pain, all this crying, like intense existential crying of loss of the firstborn. And now we're into the Exodus. We're up to the Jewish people leaving en masse in the morning. We're not going to go in the middle of the night like with thieves. We're going to go in the morning. We're going to hold ourselves up and we're going to follow God, follow Moses, Aaron and Miriam into the desert. We're going to be these faithful people who've understood. Apparently, according to the Medrash, it was only 1/5 of the Jewish people that exited Egypt at that time. There were 4/5 who died, according to the Medrash, during the plague of darkness, when it wouldn't be obvious that the Jewish people were also dying. These were the Jews who were mired in idolatry, the people who didn't believe in God and didn't want to follow God into the desert. Those were the people who were killed during the plague of darkness. So we've got 1/5 of the Jewish people leaving. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Beshallach, begins with Pharaoh sending out the people. So again, from our perspective, we see it as God extracting this nation from within another nation, taking out the Jewish people. The analogy is like taking out a calf from the womb of its mother, like literally forceps delivery, pulling out the Jewish people from the idolatrous nation. We understand by the Medrash that the Jewish people kept their names, they kept their clothing, whatever separate clothing they had, names, clothing, and language, that they kept that. And as we know, at the end, we spoke about this last week, at the end of the plagues, and when they're bringing in the lamb, they're slaughtering the lamb, the paschal offering, daubing its blood. That was a mitzvah that they followed when God told them to do that, and they did the mitzvah of circumcision. They come out. Who's bringing them out? So Pharaoh's bringing them out. Pharaoh's sending them out. Like from his perspective, somehow he's sending them out. He's still in denial. Like he still built himself up as being this, being this man in charge, this deity, this strong, powerful sovereign that isn't going to recognize God who brought all the plagues, God who undid everything, God who's bringing out the Jewish people is not going to recognize that. And we understand what we read in this week's Torah portion is God hardening the heart of Pharaoh such that he follows after the Jewish people. So the Jewish people leave and they are led by God on a circuitous route. They don't go directly to the Red Sea. They don't go directly to Mount Sinai, which is their destination to receive the Torah. They don't leave directly. They go in a circuitous route. And it's an interesting thing to think about when we are running away from something, when we want to extricate ourselves from evil, or from maybe not evil in our lives, but if we want to distance ourselves from influences that we think are not good for us or that's not serving us well. Like, do we do it gradually? Do we do it right away? Are we doing it with an abruptness? Are we doing it with like in a gradual, slow way? Do we do it quickly? Do we burn our bridges? Do we extricate ourselves and don't look back? So these people who are leaving, some of them are, very strongly believing in God, Jewish people. Some of them are what's called the Erev Rav. They're the Egyptians that wanted to go along. They sort of went on the coattails of the Jewish people. They went with them. So it's a little bit the mixed multitudes, they're called. went out with this Jewish people, and they're following Moses and Aaron. They have faith. They're going in a circuitous route, such that they don't have a way to go back. They've cut off their bridge. They don't have a way back, right? So sometimes when we think about, like, do we go the short way? Do we go the long way? Sometimes the long way might be the shortest way. So that sounds oxymoronic, but sometimes if you want to get somewhere, the best way isn't to go the shortest way, because the shortest way might have temptations. It might have things in the way that could derail us and send us in a different direction or send us back. So what's happening to this Jewish people that's being formed as a nation? Obviously, we were a family, and then we became enslaved, we became a nation. We're coming out as a nation. We're coming out as a people, as an Am Yisrael, and we have to learn how to not be slaves anymore. Okay, maybe, we have some kind of identity because of our language and our names and our clothing, but we also were mired in idolatry. We have to undo that. We have to undo the slavery that we had endured for many hundreds of years, and learn how to be a free people. Learn how to attach ourselves to the one God. And this is the lesson. This is the travel. This is the journey. Yes, it's a journey to the desert to get the Torah at Mount Sinai and then get to the land of Israel, but the journey is a progression, is a way to grow and to become the kinds of people that merit to receive the Torah, that are the people that are going to receive the Torah. Everything that was done with the plagues and everything was done without any involvement of the Jewish people. But now the Jewish people have to kind of like become partners with God. We're not just going to sit back and let everything happen to us. We have to act. There has to be a certain amount of action. And one of the things we did was follow Moses into the desert, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where we're going. I just mentioned last week that I watched this movie, Harriet, about Harriet Tubman, and how many of the slaves in the era when we had slavery in America didn't want to leave their masters. They wanted to stay. They were used to that. It was something they knew. They were scared of going into the future, right? So here we are, are we scared of change? Are we scared of moving on? Are we scared of undoing things that aren't working for us and finding things that are going to allow us to really attach to what's real and to do good in the world? In our own lives, obviously when we get to Passover, we think about it a lot, what is holding us back, and how do we really be the kinds of people that we have the potential to be, and what kind of people do we want to be? What's going to add meaning to our life? What is meaningful in our lives? What's real and what isn't real? And before Moses leaves, he says that he's going to take the bones of Joseph. So Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. So while the Bnei Yisrael, while the Am Yisrael, while the Jewish people are collecting gold and silver from the Egyptians, which is something that they were told they were allowed to do and they should do, and the Egyptians were giving them gold and silver, what was Moses doing? Moses was going to find the bones of Joseph and bring them out with him. And there's an amazing medrash where he goes, apparently Joseph's bones are in a coffin and they're sunk into the river Nile. And Moses goes to the river Nile and he throws in a piece of metal on which is written the words of the name of God, and uprises the bones of Joseph, and he takes them with him. So he's looking for these bones. That's his mission right now. That's what he's doing. And it's an amazing thing to think about. What do we spend our time doing, right? So the Jewish people there are amassing wealth, and that's good, and they needed the money and they needed the wealth, and they're going to build the tabernacle later on, and they need this stuff. And what's Moses doing? He's showing us that the wise heart, I don't know where this quote comes from, but the wise heart gathers mitzvos, gathers good deeds, gathers things that we're going to actually take with us into the next world, that's going to attach ourselves to us. So it says that Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, meaning that the act of taking these bones was a very good thing to do, something important to do, something very meaningful to do, and that became a part of his essence. That was an expression of Moses' essence, that he was concerned about doing things that were meaningful and important at this moment where they're fleeing and being sent out by Pharaoh out of Egypt. So it's an amazing kind of thought to think about Moses doing this. But another way to interpret the word for bones, yes, he's taking the bones, but he's also, another way to interpret that word bones in Hebrew is that he's taking the essence of Joseph. The essence of Joseph, how he was, what he was the personification of, that's what Moses took with him. They became him. So yes, we understand that Moses was the most humble of all people, and we say that. what was Joseph? Joseph was Yosef Hasadik. He was a righteous person. We go back to the story where he's being seduced by Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife wants relations with him, and it's an empty house, and there's a national holiday, and everybody's gone, and she seduces him, and he runs outside, he flees, he's able to resist her temptation. That ability to resist the sexual temptations that Potiphar's wife was seducing him with is something that's laid down. It's a foundation. Yosef is known as the Yisod in Kabbalistic terms, the foundation, and that's what Moses internalized. He internalized that, and he internalized the attributes that Joseph was known for, which was of patience and of emunah, of faith, patience, faith, humility, and ability to withstand sexual temptations. And those were the attributes that Moses took. So I think sometimes when we attach ourselves to people, or we want to hang out with people, or we spend our time with people, we want them to be people from whom we can learn. We want to take those attributes and have them be ours. Like sometimes they say that there are times where it's okay to be jealous, right? So you don't want to be jealous of somebody's whatever car or house or what they have, but you could be jealous of somebody's knowledge, or you could be jealous of somebody's good character traits, because it motivates you to want to achieve that also. You learn from them. You're like, I want to be like that. And how do I get to be like that? Hang out with that person, learn from that person, and let that person rub off on you. What Moses was doing when he was taking the bones and looking for the bones, number one, he's doing a mitzvah. He's doing a really important thing of securing the burial of Joseph in the land of Israel, which is where he gets buried. But he's also taking the essence of Joseph with him. Like that's what becomes integrated into his being. So that's one thing I think was really important to point out here. So actually there's an interesting story. I'm not sure where the story comes from. I'm not sure if it's the Gemara, but I'll get back to you on that one. A story about a man who is very poor, and he's living with his family, and one day his wife sends him out. He says, you have to find us money. We don't have anything to live on. You have to go find money. So he takes a boat and he goes to this land. And in this land, he lands on the beach, and there's like diamonds and jewels everywhere, all over the beach. And he's like, this is amazing. So he picks up all these diamonds and he puts them in his pockets, and he goes into town, and he wants to buy some food. So he goes to the store, and he goes into the store, and he says, I'd like to buy some food. And they say, okay, it's going to cost, this much. And he goes, oh, here, I have these diamonds to pay for the food. So the store owner says, are you kidding me? Everybody, just go down to the beach, you help yourself to those jewels. Those jewels don't mean anything to us here. What our currency is schmaltz, is like chicken fat. I don't know where the story came from, but it's an interesting story, and it kind of lays a foundation for something. So it says that what's currency in our land is schmaltz, is chicken fat. So he goes, oh, that's crazy. Well, how do I get some of that? So he learns how to get that, and he masses, great storehouses of schmaltz, and he lives in this land for a year or so, and then it's time to go home. So he takes all this schmaltz with him on his boat, and he goes back home, and he comes to his wife, and she says, okay, what have you got for me? And he goes, I have all this schmaltz. And she says, what are you talking about? What's that? That's not going to get us anything in this country, this land. And thankfully he had in his pockets, he had a few diamonds and jewels left over. In the hem of his pants, he had a few jewels, and he was able to live off that. I guess the point of the story is, what is it that we value, right? So we might live in a land where what's valuable is jewels. But we as Jewish people sometimes live on the other side. Abraham was known as Avraham Ha'ivri. He was on the other side. Like, we don't necessarily always follow in the ways of the land within which we live. So if this what's valued is to be super rich, or to whatever it is. I don't want to talk about football or basketball, but we do have those people that are held up in our society as great people. But from the Jewish standpoint, when we hold up people who are wise, and people who are happy with their lot, and people who are able to control themselves, and there's other ways in which we look at the world, and what we think is important, right? So what do we think is important, and why is it important, and where do we get our values from? Do we get them from the prevailing culture, or do we get them from the Torah? Do we get them from God? Do we get them from our tradition? Where do our values come from? And when they and when they oppose each other, like that's when it really comes to the fore, like what's really important. So that's a topic for another time. It's really about ethics and values, and really how we as a Jewish people live our lives and what it is that we value, right? So like this man who was in the land where schmaltz was what was, this chicken fat was what valued, right? So this is not valuable. You don't take that with you. Right? You don't take that with you into the next world. What do you take to the next world? You take your good deeds. You take who you are, what you've become, what you've made of yourself in the moral realm, like how you've advanced yourself and the good you've done in this world. And so that's Moses. Moses is showing us that what he was doing when the rest of the Bnei Israel, the Jewish people, are getting their money and their gold and their silver from the Mitzrayim, from the Egyptians. Moses is going and getting the bones of Joseph and making sure that promise, he's hearkening to the promise that the Jewish people made to Joseph, that they would take his bones out with him and that he would be buried in Israel, and that he's doing that mitzvah of doing that. So the Jewish people are coming out. They're being sent out by Pharaoh. They're traveling the circuitous route. They're not going the direct way, or sometimes the direct way has too many pitfalls and too many things that might take us back. So we're going to go the long road, so to speak. Sometimes the long road is the fastest route or the most effective route. It's going to get us there. It's not going to derail us. We're not going to have challenges along the way that are too much for us. In this particular situation, the Philistines were very close and they would attack us. And God says perhaps the people will reconsider when they see a war and they will return to Egypt. So in order to not even tempt them to want to turn around or go back, God takes them a circuitous route so they don't face the Philistines who are going to attack them and get fearful of the war that's going to ensue and then turn back. So he takes them on a circuitous route. So just maybe also think about that, like when we're moving away from a place, like how do we do that, and where do we go, and what is our goal? Where are we going? Okay, so we traveled by day with a pillar of cloud, and at night with a pillar of fire. So God was leading us with this pillar of fire and with this pillar of clouds to show us the way, and we're following. And sometimes in the Torah sources we talk about day and night. Yes, about the sun cycles. If it's sun is up, it's daytime, and the sun is down, and the moon is up, it's nighttime. But it's also metaphorical that daytime is when there's clarity, when we can see, when we understand, when we know things. That's considered daytime. When everything's very clear, that's daytime. Nighttime is where it's more hidden. There's lack of clarity. It's uncertain. We don't quite know our way. So there's a pillar of fire leading us. God is leading us through this pillar of fire. And one of the things I read that I think also brings it down to our lives is what's leading us? Like who are our mentors? Who are other people that we're following? Are we following people that are leading us the correct way? So again, as old as we are, and whatever age you are, there are people that are leading us. As much as we might be a leader, but we also are being led by others. There's a hierarchy. We're never at the top of that hierarchy. We still have people above us that we're following. Even the greatest people hopefully have somebody, quote unquote, above them, somebody with whom they're always learning. Okay, so that's and maybe just an idea of the fire, the pillar of fire that led the Jewish people as they were exiting the land of Egypt. All right, so they're coming. They continue to move. Pharaoh has his change of heart, and he comes after them with his chariots. He himself is harnessing the chariots to the horses. He's like, okay, we got to go get these people. 3 days they had said that they were going to go and celebrate with God in the wilderness, in the desert, and it's now more than 3 days. God hardens the heart of Pharaoh. He's now upset that he let these people go. He recognizes that he needed them to build his pyramids or whatever they were building, and he now goes after them with all his chariots and all his armies, and he's coming after them. And the Jewish people are taken such that into a route, circuitous route, such that they reach the water, the sea. They reach the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, the Reed Sea. So in front of them is the Reed Sea. Behind them is the ensuing army of the Egyptians coming, and according to the Medrash, either side of them are wild animals. So they're really locked in. They don't have anywhere to go, and they're fearful. They are fearful. So again, there's a concept of fear, what it is that we fear, how we overcome our fears, what it is that how we move through our fears. And what the Jewish people do is they cry out. They cry out and they complain. There's a lot of complaining that goes on, but they cry out, and so here, Egypt was journeying after them, and they were very frightened. The children of Israel, I'm reading right out of the Torah, the children of Israel cried out to God, and they said to Moses, were there no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What is it that you have done to us to take us out of Egypt? Is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, let us be and we will serve Egypt? For it is better that we should serve Egypt than we should die in the wilderness. So their complaints are really deep. Like, what are you doing? And why are we here? And we're going to die, and we're frightened, and we're still have this slave mentality. We're still not 100% in. We don't really know what's going to happen. We're faced between the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians coming behind us, and the sea in front of us, and the wild animals on either side. And Moses said to the people, don't fear. Do not fear. Okay, this is very important for our lives. Like, what do we fear? What are we fearful of? How do we overcome our fears? Do we have faith that things are going to be okay? Is there okay? Do not fear, stand fast and see the salvation of God that he will perform for you today. For as you have seen Egypt today, you will not see them ever again. Hashem will do battle for you, and you shall remain. Hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, what is this silence? The silence of prayer. Like, are the Jewish people told to now pray to God to save them, or not? And Moses is saying, no prayers. We're not talking about prayers here. Now you have to act. So God says to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Speak to the children of Israel and let them journey forth. So right here is where there's a injunction for the Jewish people to act, right? When they're not told to fight the Egyptians, they're not told to go back to slavery. They're told to move forward into the sea. And obviously we know the sea splits, but there was one man, his name was Nachshon ben Aminadav, and he's the first one to go into the water. And the Midrash tells us that he goes in, and as he goes in, the water is walking in and in and in. It gets up to his nostrils, and then it splits. But this notion of putting in an effort, that we have to not just stand there and say, God, fix my problems for me. God, give me money. God, whatever it is that we want, that in this world that we live in, the world that is a world that these Jewish people are moving into, is a world where we are not passive recipients of God's blessing. There is a partnership that's beginning to form between the Jewish people and God. And it's not about sitting on the couch and praying for money. It's about getting up and going to work. It's not about saying, God, help me and save me. It's about moving forward. How do we move forward? What do we do to move forward? I heard a very interesting quote. I don't know where I got it from, but God directs the world by blessing our efforts with success. If we're going to be successful, the only way we'll be successful is if we try. Right? So we can't be successful if we don't try. You can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, one ticket. You don't have to buy two tickets because it doesn't change your odds. Or if you're going to win, you're going to win. If God wants you to win, you'll win. One ticket. But prayer isn't the only course of action in our world. The world we live in, which is the world the Jewish people are moving into, is a world where we have to put in our efforts. Our efforts are prayer. We're not looking. God replace the need to expend effort, right? So prayer does not replace the need to expend effort. We have to put effort in. We have to put our best foot forward. The Jewish people, when they were in this between a rock and a hard place, had to move forward. And when they moved forward, God split the sea. But they had a sense that they had put something into it. There's a concept of bread of shame, where you get something for nothing. And maybe it pertains to how we treat our children or how we treat people, right? It says it's better to set somebody up. The highest form of charity, the highest form of tzedakah is justice. Really, it's not charity, but the highest form of tzedakah, of justice in the world, is to give people work so they can earn their living, more than giving a person a handout, more than just giving your children stuff. We want to give them a sense of pride, give them a sense of connection, give them a sense that they've done something to earn what they've got, right? So this is the time where God is telling the Jewish people, don't just cry out to me. This is not the time for crying. This is the time for action. This is the time for you to move forward. When you move forward, the sea will split, but you have to put the effort in first. I'm not going to bless your moving forward with success till you move forward. So I think this is a really important lesson in our lives of, like, we try and we fail and we try and we fail, but sometimes we succeed and sometimes we're blessed. But it's blessed. It's God is blessing our efforts, right? You're not going to, again, you're not going to win the lottery if you don't buy the ticket. You're not going to earn a living if you don't go out and find a job. You're not, so these are things that we have to put the effort into. And this is what the Jewish people are doing at the Reed Sea. They're right there. And God says, watch what's going to happen, right? It's the same language that Miriam, if you remember way back when we spoke about Miriam, and she was standing at the banks of the Nile, and she put the little baby Moses into the little ark, and she set him down on the Nile, and she watched from afar to see what would happen. Would her prophecy come true? Would there be salvation? And she watches, and there's salvation. The Yabatya, the daughter of Pharaoh, comes down, picks up Moses, and he grows up in the house of Pharaoh. What's going to happen to the Jewish people? Stand and watch, but move forward. You have to move forward. Why do you remain silent? Why do you cry out to me? You have to journey forth. And that's what they do. And so it's really important to understand that. So what happens? What happens? We know what happens. The sea splits. The wind comes. It splits. There's dry land and there's water on either side. So let's go back to the first time there was separation between waters that created dry land on day 3 of creation. I'm going to read you day 3 of creation back in the book of Genesis. God said, let the waters beneath the heaven be gathered into one area and let the dry land appear. This is after there was separation of waters, upper and lower waters. That was on day 2. On day 3 of creation, the waters beneath the heaven, that's the waters in our world, the seas, the oceans, right, gathered into one area, and the dry land appeared. Who's going to live on the dry land? All the animals, all the vegetations, people, us, right? God created a dry land in order to create a makom, a place for people to live, right? And it's what's happening here. The water split. There's walls of water either side. There's dry land, a place for people to move forward. And they move forward. And the Jewish people move in, and the Egyptians come behind them, if you remember. And you probably all know that what happens is that the waters close in, close back down. They go back to their natural state, back to being one. And the Egyptians are churned. The language is that they're churned up. The horse and the rider. There's a lot of imagery of the horse and the rider. So just sidebar comment about horse and rider. The horse is, in Kabbalistic terms, the physicality of a person. It's our body. It's our animal side. That's the horse. And who's riding on the horse? Our soul, our essence, our divine breath that animates us, that gives us transcendence. That's the rider. Hopefully we're people where our body, our horses aren't what's leading us. It's our soul is leading us, not our bodies, right? So what's happening with the Egyptians is they're getting swelled up. The horse and the rider are churned up, and the language that is used is that some sink like lead, some sink like stones. I guess lead and stones must sink differently and go down differently. And some are like straw, and they churn up and down, up and around and down. And the Jewish people saw the Egyptians, some of whom died by being churned up like straw, some of who died like being like lead, and some like stone, meaning that those Egyptians who were the most cruel and the most evil and the most horrible and wicked people were the ones that were like straw, and the ones that sort of went along and were a little somewhat nice, but really, like, I don't know, like they weren't as evil as the evil people. They did bad things, but they weren't as evil, that they went down like lead, right? So there was a sense of justice that the Jewish people could see, that the Egyptians that were truly bad were like the straw, and they had a worse end than those that went down like lead or like stones, or different kinds of ways in which the Egyptians were punished, and the death that they endured, the way in which they died was different depending on how evil they were to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people saw that, and they understood that what God was doing was, it's called Mida Keneged Mida. It's measure for measure, that the demise of particular Egyptians was tailor-made for how they acted towards the Jewish people. And so that's what the Jewish people saw. And what they saw was a complete revelation of the oneness of God. So we don't talk about this a lot because we talk about the revelation of Mount Sinai, which will be next week's Torah portion. When we get to Mount Sinai and we receive the Torah, there's a revelation of God on Mount Sinai. What we don't talk about as much is the revelation of the oneness of God here during the splitting and the coming back down of the Reed Sea, when it churns up the Egyptians, when they're killed, when there's this divine justice, when there's the Jewish people come out the other side. Actually, they don't come out the other side; they come back the same side. It's incorrect that they didn't go from one side to the other side. They actually went in and then came back out the same side they went in. But what they saw was God opening up the seas, separating the seas like he did in creation, creating a dry land for the Jewish people to go through, and then closing it back up on the Egyptians, and they were all killed, and all their spoils, all their wealth, all their jewels washed up, and the Jewish people took all that. There is a debate as to whether Pharaoh was killed. Some of the commentators say he wasn't killed, that he didn't die, that he went off and lived the rest of his life somewhere else. But it doesn't really matter. What we're learning here is the clarity that the Jewish people had when this whole thing happened, when the sea split and then it come back. And what did the Jewish people do? They sang a song. They sang this song. It's called Az Yashir. Then Moses and then Moses and the children of Israel chose to sing a song to God, and they said the following. And this song, Az Yashir, then they sang this song. That word Az is 2 letters in the Torah. It's, then. The word Az means then. Then they sang this song. Then. What's then? Then is now, and then is an allusion to the future. In the future, we're going to sing Az, then now, and then in the future, we're going to sing. And Az is made up of 2 letters, an Aleph and a Zayin. An Aleph has a numerical value of 1, and Zayin has a numerical value of 7. And when you add 7 and 1, you get 8. And 8 is above the natural order. 7 is the days of the week. 7 is the colors in the rainbow. 7 is the notes on a scale. 7 is the order of our world. 8 takes you beyond that, takes you into the supernatural. What was happening when God did all this is he's showing the supernatural, right? You have a natural world, and God can change it, and he can move it, and he can change, and it can be above nature. The Jewish people are above nature. The fact that we even exist today is supernatural. It's not the way of the world that this little nation called the Jewish people should be here, and we should survive and thrive and be who we are and bring to the world what we're going to bring. And God's given us a promise. I'm going to bring you to Sinai. I'm going to give you the Torah. I'm going to give you wisdom. I'm going to give you the land of Israel. And in the future, there'll be a 3rd temple. There'll be the resurrection of the dead. There's going to be a Messiah. There's going to be all this stuff that's going to happen at the end of days. And what the Jewish people experienced at this time, what they experienced was a clarity of vision. They understood the whole picture. It was like the oneness of God was revealed to them. They saw the whole thing. Like when they came out of Egypt, they weren't sure what's happening. What are these plagues? What's going on? We don't really know. And we're coming, and we don't really know, is God on our side? Is he on their side? What's he going to do to us? We're fearful. We don't know what the relation's going to be. We don't know our relationship to God. We don't know what's going to happen to us. Yes, we're hearing things, but we don't know. And when this experience of the sea splitting and then the sea coming crashing down on top of the Egyptians, and it was measure for measure, and the horse and the rider are spewing around, and all the spoils come onto the shore. At that point, they had a clarity, and they sang a song. And the song was an outburst. It was an expression of their deep faith and their understanding and their knowledge and their praise and their gratitude for everything that was happening, and their ability to understand that we are part of that whole oneness of God. Every day we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We say that every day. Some people say it twice a day. Some people say it once a week. Whenever you say it, doesn't matter. It's our banner cry. Shema, we say it before we die. We say it many times. What is it? What are we saying? We're saying that what we bring to the world is a echadness, a oneness. There's a oneness of God and the world. We are in the oneness of God. We are part of that oneness. When the sea split and made room for us, we went in. It was as if we have our own existence. It was as if we're living on dry land. When the sea came back down, it's a metaphor for, but don't get too caught up in the fact that you think you're separate, that you have a perception that you exist independent of God. You don't. We don't. We think we do, and it seems like we do because we're not really tuned in properly, but we're not. We're part of a oneness. There's a oneness of the entirety of everything, and we exist within that. There's a mystical concept called Tzimtzum, whereby God sort of withdrew, so to speak, and it's a bigger concept, but I'm going to introduce it. Maybe some of you know it, but withdrew in order for there to be a creation. In order for there to be a creation, God had to mitzamsem. He had to withdraw his presence, his oneness, such that we have the perception that we exist independent of God. But we don't. And what the Jewish people experienced at this, when the sea came in, what they experienced was the oneness. They saw with clarity that we are part of that oneness, and it was love, and it was connection, and it was song. They sang. It came from a place without words. It came from a place that they just couldn't contain. It was beyond words. There was a shira. There was a song that came from them that they all knew. They all sang the same song. Apparently there was a huge miracle that Moses sang this song spontaneously, which everybody could hear, and everybody repeated it because they knew it too. It was a miraculous singing of a song. And I think we should really dwell on this concept of a song and what a song is and how important it is to sing. And really, when we sing, we're full of joy, and the joy that the Jewish people experienced and the revelation that they had at the Red Sea was one that is beyond what any prophet, there's a saying that even the lowest maidservant of the Jewish people saw what the prophet Yechezkel did not see. There's a prophecy of the prophet Yechezkel, who sees the heavenly chariot. He gets this vision of the heavenly chariot, and it's described. Maybe we could read it sometime in one of the Haftorahs we read over Passover. But he has this amazing revelation, and he sees this heavenly chariot. But the Jewish people at the Yam Suf, at the Red Sea, saw more than he did. They saw more. So what they sing this song, what are they singing? They sing, I will sing to Hashem, for he is exalted above the arrogant, and the horse and the rider into the sea. And it goes on about how he's master of the war, and the chariots and the army he threw into the sea. And the deep waters covered them, and they descended like stone. It goes on, and I want to, it's not that long, but I don't really have time to read the whole thing, but you're welcome to read it. We say it every day in our daily prayers in the morning. But there's this really amazing line where the Jewish people and Moses sing this song, and what they do is they say, this is my God, almost like they could point to the God, this is my God, there he is, there's God. Like they had such a connection and such a relationship to divine energy and power and oneness that they're pointing, there's God. Zeh Eli v'anvehu, and I will build him a sanctuary. I will beautify myself by him. I will want that connection. That connection is so deep, and it's so existential, and it's so loving, and it's so powerful. I mean, we survived the experience. The next week we'll read when they have their revelation at Sinai that the people's experience of revelation actually kills them, and they're brought back to life, and kills them brought back to life. But that we don't read about that here, but we do read that they had this connection. They experienced a connection to the divine oneness that was beyond any experience we've ever had, which is probably why we read it every day, right? We might read the words of Az Yashir, of this song that was sung at this time when the horse and the rider were churned up and the Egyptians were killed, etc. But really it's about understanding that we're part of the oneness, and that God's teaching us that lesson. We're coming from being slaves. We're coming from an idolatrous country that we were mired in, and now we have to learn to understand this reality, the real part, the real way of the world. Not that's not real. This is real. God is real, right? This is my God. We say this every day. This is my God, and I will build the sanctuary one day. There'll be the third temple, but today I'm going to recognize that behind everything, involved in everything, in the oneness of everything, I'm part of that oneness. And that led to this outburst of song, like we're singing, our hearts are joyful, we're part of something real and big and transcendent, and we're part of that. And we're part of a people that God's bringing to a place where we're going to be partners to bring that into the world. And how amazing is that? And how meaningful is that? And how happy should that make us? So this is what we're trying to understand. And we're singing, but we also learn that the whole world is singing. We're just not tuned into it. There's a book called Perek Shira, where all the animals and all the birds and all the creation sings. The wind sings, and the mountains sing, and the sun sings, and the whole world has a song. Don't quite know what that means, but there's a song that is being sung that we're not tuned into, but we were tuned in there. We were part of that symphony, part of the oneness, and our song that we sang when we sang there at the demise of the Egyptians, recognizing that there's this one God that we're part of, and we sang along with creation this amazing symphony. So here's another quote on the. So what did we learn? We also learned not just that we're part of creation, it's all one, but that everything that happened, everything that led up to now, all the plagues and all the death of the firstborn and all of the things that brought us to this place were all part of the story. They were all had to happen. It had to be this way. And we had to learn this lesson, and it had to happen. So on the condition that all apparently unrelated and contradictory phenomena do indeed meld into a coherent, merciful, comprehensible whole. Right, so all these pieces of like our linear time, this happened and this happened and this happened, this happened, where we have a concept of time, which God is outside of time. So all of the things that happened brought us to this moment of complete revelation, of understanding the oneness, but we had to go through all of that to get to this. And then we had that epiphany, went, it's like going to a movie where like things are happening in the movie, and then this happens and that happens, and like what? And at the end, it like, it all ties together. Duh! Like, how come I didn't see it going along? Because I'm now retrospectively looking back, and I can say, it had to happen that way. It had to happen that way. And it says when we pass on from this world, and we have the clarity of being in the world of truth, we'll look back on our lives and we'll understand why this had to happen, and that had to happen, and this happened. This person died, and this sickness came, and we'll see it all. We'll understand it all. Right? We can't understand it now. We really can't. We don't, and we can't claim to. And in the future, when we get into the world of truth, that we'll look back and we'll understand the whole thing, and it'll be clear, and we'll understand it. But we don't understand it now. All right. So the men sing this song. What do the women do? Gotta do this. We gotta do this. So the women sing. So Miriam, the prophetess, right? It says right in the Torah, Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took her drum in her hand, and all the women went forth after her with drums and with dances. And Miriam spoke to them, and she said, "Sing to Hashem, for he is exalted above the arrogant, having hurled horse with its rider into the sea." That's her song. That's the women's song. The women are dancing. The women are using instruments. The men are just singing with their voices. The women are using instruments. The women have an external aspect to their joyous song experience, and they dance, and they have these drums, these tambourines. They brought with them because they knew that that good was going to come, that they were going to move into a good place. They were going to have, the salvation was going to happen. They had faith, and they brought their drums and their tambourines with them. And they sang and they danced in circles. It's a beautiful metaphor, not a metaphor. It's a beautiful understanding of women energy. Love it. Women energy of circles. Circles where we're equidistant. Nobody's more, nobody's less. Everybody's in the circle. We're dancing together. We're all equidistant from each other. And we're going in circles. We're going in circles. We're going around and around. So I want to read you a lovely poem my friend Elissa wrote about dancing in circles, because it is perfect for this. So here at the sea, we offer limb to reach beyond the limitations of a linear world gone wrong. Here we are egalitarian and elegant, responsive and penetrant. For the secret encoded in our circular chorus will speak for generations of a new paradigm of being, of how to be connected and conscious even amidst conflict, with a promise of resolution through attunement to the circle of life, to which we are all enchained, and our dance will evoke an approaching era when the ailments born of institution and competition will dissolve into equality and common dignity, for all will incorporate regardless of position on the no longer existent ladder of hierarchy. Our circle will model what it is to be fully embodied in the present, a servant to the womb of the moment, with no future tense impending and impeding the flowing rhythm of our spin. Here we are, free from the hamperings of will-be's or has-beens. Temporality is our temple in this circle, where all is ample and transparent. Ours a choreography of equality, inclusivity, and bringing all of me into the welcome crucible of community. I had to read it because I love her poetry so much. Elissa, big shout out for her. But the idea of circles, the idea of singing, the idea of equality, the idea of being able to bring a new kind of energy into the world. So as much as the men are singing as Yeshua, and we say it every day, it's a voice, right? We're dancing, we're singing, we're in circles. We're introducing a different kind of energy, a circle energy instead of an arrow energy, right? So the women are more about bringing the potential and actualizing it. Being the word for a woman in Hebrew is isha, has a hey on the end, and the word for man is ish, which has a yud in the middle of the word. So men have it all inside, and the women are a little bit more on the outside. So I don't want to go into that now, but I want to bring out the point that our dance and our circle and our ability to bring a different energy was one that Miriam the prophetess, and how amazing for her, like she was standing at the banks of the river Nile, as we just mentioned, how she's watching to see what will come of her prophecy. She had a prophecy before Moses was born that meant that she went to her parents, who had separated because they were scared of having children in the enslaved land of Egypt. She didn't want to have, her parents didn't want to have children. They separated. She goes to her parents and she says, I have a prophecy. You have to get back together. The savior of the Jewish people is going to come from you. You have to get married again. You have to have children, because from you will come the savior of the Jewish people. So when we're going to kill these 3-month-old babies, we're going to kill these newborn babies, and Moses is 3 months old. He was born 3 months premature. Now he's 3 months old. He's put in the Nile, in and out. She's standing at the side of the Nile to see what will become of her prophecy. What will happen? How's the prophecy going to come true? And now when she's standing at the banks of the Red Sea, and the Mitzrim and the Egyptians are gone. They are gone. We'll never see them again. They are dead. They're drowned. All their spoils come up on the shore. We are beyond. We're going forward. Miriam understands this is her prophecy has come true. Moses and Aaron and herself, but Moses has saved the Jewish people. It has come true. Her prophecy has come true, And now she's so full of joy, right? We're full of joy because we're seeing God and we're understanding the oneness that is all of creation, that we're part of that oneness, that what blocks us, all the things that block us were opened up. We could see through the wall that was all opaque. Now it's see-through. We're in a room with tinted windows. Now the windows are clear. We can see the reality. We can see why it all had to happen the way it did. We are one with it all. And it's an experience that we had to go through to understand that we want more of that. We want more of what we had at the Red Sea. So we're going to Sinai. We want to get to Sinai because we want more of what we had at the Red Sea, at the Red Sea. We want more of that, right? Which is why in our prayers, those people who are familiar, the morning prayers include songs of praise, which end with this song of Az Yashir, of the song that Moses and the men sang. This Az Yashir, we say that every day. And then we go straight from that into the Shema, which is proclaiming the oneness of God, right? And then we, move into the standing prayer. But before we get to the real Shema, that experience of revelation at Mount Sinai, we had to go through the experience of what happened at the Red Sea. And it's really important to bring that out and say, this is what we experienced. We experienced this oneness. And that oneness led us to sing and to be in this symphony of the world that's singing all the time. I don't know if we'll ever hear right now, we can't hear it, but we want to hear it and we want to know it's here. There's also a Gemara that says every day there's a bas kol, there's a voice of God that comes out into the world. We can't hear it because we're blocked, our perceptions don't perceive it, but they were told that every day the heavenly voice comes down and it's introduced into the world. We just don't hear it. Just like we don't hear the whole of creation singing this symphony of praise to God and this sense of attachment and oneness. So when Nachshon ben Aminadav, when he walked into the Red Sea and we all went after him, we're partners. We're now grateful that we are partners with God in this whole, relationship that we're going to be attached to God for the rest of our existence, and that what's real is this connection to God and godliness. All right, and that's our yearning. That's what we're yearning for. So they continued beyond their experience at the sea, and now they're going to head towards Mount Sinai. So what happens? They go for 3 days, and now they're thirsty, and now they start complaining. So again, we had a spiritual high. Whenever you had a spiritual high, and then 3 days later, maybe at the end of Yom Kippur, you're on this spiritual high, and then the next day you're complaining, or the next day you're doing something that you didn't want to be doing again, and now you're doing it again, right? Okay, so we're human, and we know that we're human, but the question is, or the challenge is, to have these amazing experiences, to have spiritual experiences, to have things that take us into a different realm, so to speak, and then hold on to it. How do I hold on to it? How do I hold on to that inspiration? What do I do? What is my plan? What is my plan? So they travel for 3 days, and now they start complaining about the water, and they get to this place where the water, where there's, let me see if I can find it. So they traveled. So Moses caused Israel to journey from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness for 3 days, and they didn't find water, and they came to Mara. The place is called Mara. Mara in Hebrew means bitter. And they couldn't drink the waters because the waters were bitter, and they named it Mara, and they complained. And what should we drink? And so they cried out. So Moses cried out to God, and God showed him a tree, and he threw the tree into the water, and the water became sweet. Okay, so mystically, the tree that he threw in to that water was the tree of life from the Garden of Eden. Ooh, I love these things, like how they all connect back. But the tree of life, there was a tree when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. God says to them, "Eat from every tree in the garden. Eat from every tree." That was an imperative. God wants us to eat from the world. Enjoy the world. Enjoy the physicality of the world. Eat, drink, enjoy it. However, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which they did, as you know. But there is prior to not eating, there is a imperative to eat from every tree. And there was a tree of life in the garden. And that tree of life according to one interpretation, was what Moses threw into the water. So this water that they couldn't drink because it was bitter became sweet. But there's another interpretation of what was going on. Not just that the water was bitter and became sweet by throwing something, like maybe it was the tree of life and it made it sweet, but maybe it was the people who were bitter. They could not drink the waters of Marah because they were bitter. Who's bitter? The water are bitter. Maybe the people are bitter. Right now they start complaining, we're bitter. We've forgotten what happened to us. We had this amazing experience. We were on the spiritual high. We understood the wonders of the universe. We were there. We got it. We were singing. And now we're complaining. We're bitter. Stop it. Stop being bitter, right? Like, look at your blessings, and yes, things are bitter. They are bitter, and don't deny they're bitter, but maybe in the bitterness there's some good we can attach ourselves to. We can choose how we think about what's happening to us. Are we bitter about what's happening? Are we able to reframe it and redefine it and look at it in a good way, or look at some of the good things that are happening? Is our glass half full or half empty, etc.? So it's just something to think about vis-a-vis this particular teaching, where what is it that's bitter? Is the water's bitter? We're going to complain about that. Or are we bitter? Are we bitter people? Are we not appreciating the things that we have, even in the fact that there's no water, right? So we could say, please, there's no water, or complain and be bitter about it. So the next thing that happens in the Torah portion is that we don't have food. So God sends rain from heaven. He sends us manna from heaven. It's manna. What is this? What is this food? This is spiritual food. It's food of the angels. It comes from the heavens. God is feeding us from the heavens. It's coming down. And there's a medrash about, if you were a good person, it would come close to your tent. If you weren't so good, it would go further away from your tent. If you were really good, you could eat it the way it was. If you weren't so good, then you would have to grind it up and work a little bit to make it edible. Different stories around what it was, but it was this supernatural food that came out of the heavens. We had to look up, and we only had enough for one day. Every day, this is the day. This day I have enough food. Tomorrow I have faith that I'll get another batch and I'll have enough food. On Fridays they had to collect 2, because the manna did not fall on Shabbat. And we're learning at Marah, we were taught some of the laws of Shabbat, such that when the manna fell on Fridays, we would take 2 portions, and one would be for Friday and one would be for Shabbat. And so we're learning a little bit of Torah before we even get to Mount Sinai. We're learning a little bit of Torah. This food is coming down from heaven, and it's raises questions about where our food comes from. Are you aware of where our food comes? As much as we know, when we make challah, we're very aware of all the ingredients that goes into challah, right? We have all our water and yeast and all the different things that we think about when we put all our ingredients together and we make challah, and we have this bread, and this bread is the bringing together of my effort, or human effort, and God effort, right? God allows the seeds to grow and the water to fall, and we have all our ingredients are God-given ingredients, and we take them and we partner with God and we produce bread. So something to think about in terms of our food. Where does our food come from? It comes from the supermarket, right? When we're really now moving into a plant-based diet, and people are more aware of their foods and where it comes from and blah, blah, blah. But to really think about the fact that underlying our ability to go to the supermarket and buy food and to make beautiful soups and breads and things, but at the end of the day, it's all coming from God. It's all the same as manna coming down from heaven. It's all gift from God. Our food is a gift from God. Look at an orange. There's a meditation. If anybody wants it, I'll send it to you. 10 minutes of meditating on an orange. But it's incredible. An orange is incredible. Here we are. Next week is Tu B'Shvat. We're very aware of our environment. We're aware of the natural beauty and the manna, and it's coming down from heaven. So we should know that every day this food is coming to you. I'm sustaining you. I want relationship with you. You have a job to do. You have to, and I'm giving you the food, God says to the Jewish people in the desert. So you have everything you need. I'll give you food. I'll give you water. Your clothes won't wear out. The food is so perfect. It's so spiritual that there's no waste. So you don't go to the bathroom. There's no going to the bathroom in the desert, because the food was completely absorbed. It was perfect. There was no waste. That's perfect food. And therefore, your whole time in the desert you can spend growing and learning and becoming the best you can be, and attaching yourself to God and attaching yourself to the reality of how to live once you get into the land of Israel. So I'm going to give you everything you need, so you don't need to expend any effort to do anything else, but just learn and grow and work on yourselves. That's what you have to do. So maybe in our lives, how much do we work? Do we overwork? Are we also spending time working on ourselves? What's the balance between how much we expend, satisfying our needs, and how much our physical needs, and how much time do we spend working on our spiritual needs, right? That balance, like, for every person it's different, but just to kind of point that out here with the Torah reading about the manna coming down from heaven. One last thought before we end is, at the very end, the Jewish people are attacked by Amalek. So Amalek is our epiphanol. He's the essence of evil in the world, and he attacks the Jewish people, and he comes from behind. And Moses goes up on the hill, and he holds his hands up, and when his hands are held up and the Jewish people are looking up, then the Jewish people, as they fight against the Amalekites, are winning, are ahead. And when Moses' arms get tired and they come down, then they start to lose, so he holds them up. So he goes up on the hill with two assistants either side, one of whom is Hur. Hur is the son of Miriam, Moses' sister, and Aaron. So Aaron's on one side holding one arm up, and Hur, the son of Miriam, is on the other side holding his arm up. And we win, obviously, because God wants us to win out over evil and to beat the Amalekites. But just one thing I heard, very interesting thought, that when Amalek attacks the Jewish people, he's attacking the people from behind, like the older people and the less connected people. And perhaps that's also something to think about. Who are the marginalized people in our societies? Make sure we bring them in. We don't want people to be on the margins. Like, being on the margins isn't a Jewish thing, right? We have to bring people in. We're one. We're Am Echad. We're one people, and we don't want people trailing behind and being on the outsides and vulnerable, etc. We want everybody to feel like they're part of the bell curve. So I've spoken a lot and I've said a lot, and there's a lot in this week's Torah portion. So let's quick recap. Jewish people coming out of Egypt. Pharaoh sends them out. They go a circuitous route. Moses brings the bones of Yosef with him, and they leave. They travel. They come to the Red Sea. The Egyptians, Pharaoh his heart is hardened by God. He comes after them, and God says, "Don't cry out. Step into the Red Sea. Move forward. Put in your effort. I'll save you. Be silent. Don't pray. Just move. Put your efforts in. I'll bless your efforts." And they move in. The sea splits, creates this land, creates space for man to walk through, just like he did in the creation. And then the sea is closed back in on the Egyptians. The Egyptians are swirled around. They die. The Jewish people watch that. They sing out. They have this song that's spontaneous and symphonic and harmonious, and they're all singing it together. It's a miracle that they sing it together and they know all the words. And Miriam and her women are dancing in circles with their tambourines, which is where we get that whole notion of women's and tambourines, creating a different energy of circularity and egalitarianism, and enjoying the moment. Let's enjoy the moment where we're in this circle dance and we're all equal. And then they travel on 3 days. They come. There's water. The water is bitter. Who's bitter, the water or the people? And then we have manna coming down from heaven, and then we have the attack by Amalek. So what are we doing? What's happening? We're transitioning from a slave people to a free people, to a people who are above the prophet Yechezkel, who saw and had a revelation of God at the splitting and the converging of the Red Sea. They had a experience of God that transcended anything they'd ever experienced. They realized that this is God. They understood God. They wanted to be part of that. They wanted to continue to experience in the oneness of God. They're eager to get to Sinai, to get the Torah. And God continues to supply their needs, giving them food, giving them water, giving them clothing. And maybe in our own lives, we have to kind of sometimes just kind of look beyond the surface and see beneath, what is on the outside, like what's on the inside. On the inside is soul, on the inside is God, on the inside is transcendence, on the inside is something that's infinite, something that connects us to the reality, and working on connecting to that is really our mission. So I wish you all a good week.